In a sprawling estate tucked away on the edge of the Blue Ridge Mountains, a man named Victor Holden lived alone. Once a titan of industry, Victor's fortune was built from steel, sweat, and sleepless nights. But after a devastating accident left him paralyzed from the waist down, his world shrank from boardrooms and international flights to the silent, echoing halls of his mansion. He rarely spoke. He never laughed. And above all, he trusted no one. That all changed the day he met them. Two girls, no older than 7, standing barefoot on the stone steps of his estate. Identical down to the faint scar on their chins, their eyes held a fierceness, a hunger not for food, but for belonging. Their names were Nia and Nyla. He hadn't planned to adopt them. It was a moment of impulsive charity sparked by something strange and sharp in their gaze. Maybe it was pity. Maybe guilt. Or maybe the flicker of a challenge. When the orphanage director had said no family would take them because they came in a pair, Victor surprised himself by saying, "I'll take both." The first weeks were chaos. The twins brought a whirlwind of energy into his sterile world. They rearranged everything, his art, his books, even the placement of his wheelchair. They scribbled drawings on the marble floor with chalk and sang in made-up languages while sliding down banisters. Victor hated it. And loved it. But more than their mischief, what disturbed him most was how often they stared at him. Studied him. As if they were waiting for something. One rainy afternoon, as lightning danced along the ridge and the sky churned, the girls sat cross-legged at his feet, staring again. Victor was reading a rare book on Roman architecture, pretending not to notice. "Why don't you get up?" Nyla asked suddenly. Victor's eyes didn't move from the page. "Because I can't." Nia tilted her head. "Did someone say you can't, or do you just believe it?" Victor slammed the book shut, irritation bubbling beneath his calm mask. Spinal cord trauma is not about belief. The twins exchanged a look. It was the same silent language they always spoke, a telepathy that unnerved the staff. "We can help," Nia whispered. Victor barked a dry, bitter laugh, the first sound of amusement from him in months. "What are you, doctors?" "No," Nyla said, her voice eerily soft. "But we remember things." He froze. "Remember what?" The girls looked up at him, serious now, their playfulness drained. "Before," said Nia. "Before what?" he demanded. Nyla placed her tiny hand over his. Her skin was warm, electric. "Before here. Before now. When we were somewhere else." Victor pulled his hand away sharply. "Enough. Go to your room." They didn't move. Nia leaned closer. "Do you feel that?" He opened his mouth to retort, then paused. There was a sensation. A flicker. A warmth. In his right foot. No. Impossible. His jaw clenched. He closed his eyes. Waited. There it was again. Faint. Like the memory of touch. But real. He slowly bent down, grabbed his ankle, squeezed. Nothing. But when Nia touched his shin again, heat. Tingling. Victor gasped, the color draining from his face. "What did you do?" he rasped. "We're remembering you," Nyla said. "What does that even mean?" The lights flickered as thunder cracked overhead. The twins didn't blink. "You were meant to find us," Nia said calmly. "To help us remember. And when we remember, things return." Victor wheeled back, heart hammering in his chest. The words didn't make sense, but neither did the sudden pins and needles now creeping up his calves. That night he didn't sleep. Instead, he sat in the dark, staring at his legs. By morning, he could wiggle his toes. The news swept through the household like wildfire. His nurse wept. His doctor accused him of faking it. The twins simply smiled. But things only got stranger from there. Victor began to dream. Vivid, sprawling dreams of a place he'd never been. A vast library floating in the sky, endless hallways of stars, voices that spoke in music instead of words. In every dream, the twins were there. Older. Wiser. dressed in robes that shimmered like moonlight. One morning, he woke up with a phrase on his lips, Valoran Tessa. He had no idea what it meant, but when he whispered it aloud, his lights turned on. Without touching a switch. The twins came into his room moments later, holding hands, faces solemn. "You're remembering," Nia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" he asked. They glanced at each other. "Who were you?" Nyla corrected. That afternoon, Victor took his first step in 6 years. And the world noticed. Media vans parked outside the estate. Scientists demanded explanations. Doctors requested interviews. But Victor turned them all away. He was beginning to suspect the truth was something no one could accept. In the weeks that followed, the girls changed. Not physically, they remained the same mischievous, curious twins, but something in their aura deepened. Animals followed them. Plants bloomed in places they hadn't been planted. The mansion itself began to change. Doors opened before they were touched, clocks ran backward at times, and mirrors occasionally reflected rooms that no longer existed. Victor tried to rationalize it. Maybe the trauma had damaged more than his spine. Maybe he was hallucinating. But then one day, deep in the eastern wing, once used for storage, he found a room he didn't remember building. Inside was a mural, freshly painted, though no artist had been hired. It depicted a man who looked exactly like him, standing with the two girls atop a glowing mountain, holding a sword made of fire. Below the mural, carved into the wall in golden letters, were the words, "The bound ones return. The gate will open." Victor stood in silence, breath caught in his throat. The twins appeared behind him. "It's almost time," Nyla said. Victor turned slowly. "Time for what?" Nia smiled. "To finish what we started. A long time ago." And for the first time since their arrival, Victor realized he hadn't adopted them. They had found him. Victor's breath hitched as the weight of that simple phrase settled over him like a storm cloud. They had found him. He felt both an ancient familiarity and a ripping dislocation, as if a veil had been torn away to reveal a reality he had never known. The twins stood there, expressions grave, tiny hands entwined, and in their gaze he perceived not childish playfulness, but the cold certainty of fate fulfilled. He swallowed hard and forced his voice out in a rough whisper. "What have I started?" Nia's lips curved into a thin, enigmatic smile. "You began it long before you were born." Victor's mind rebelled at the words. "Then who, what am I?" Nyla stepped forward, her robes whispering against the marble floor though no breeze stirred. "You are the key-bearer, the one who holds the path open between worlds. We are the bound ones, tethered to your spirit until the gate is whole again." Victor's pulse thundered in his ears. His gaze flicked to the mural. Himself, the twins, the flaming sword, the mountain that seemed to glow with molten crystal. The golden inscription. The gate. He had dismissed it as some trick of his mind, but now every impossible thing he'd experienced snapped into clarity. The mansion's flickering corridors, the books that rearranged themselves, the way his wheelchair had suddenly become irrelevant. Each was a signpost leading him here, to this moment. He wheeled himself forward, gingerly at first, then more boldly as sensations bloomed in his legs. Pain lanced, but it was proof of life, of authenticity. "You taught me to walk again," he said, voice raw with wonder. "Because you needed me to stand. And because we needed you to rise," Nia replied. She reached out, brushing a fingertip against his forearm. He nearly recoiled, but the contact was not pain, it was recognition, like the pulse of a long-forgotten melody. It sang through his veins. A distant rumble of thunder shook the windows. The twins held each other's gaze, then turned to him in unison. "It's time," they said. Victor felt a constriction in his chest. "Time for what?" "For the gate to open," Nyla said, gesturing toward the corridor beyond the secret chamber. "To let the worlds converge once more. To restore the balance." His rational mind rebelled, yet a deeper part inside him stirred, an instinct older than reason. He rose from the wheelchair, every muscle trembling, and placed a hand on the wall beside the mural. The surface felt warm, alive, as if it pulsed with hidden energy. He ran his fingers along the carved letters. The bound ones return. The gate will open. A subtle vibration thrummed through the stone. The twins watched him, expectancy shining in their eyes. Victor closed his eyes and inhaled. He had lived decades in the confines of his fortune, a realm of contracts and calculations. But fortune is a fragile thing. His accident had taught him how easily the world can shift. Now he stood at the cusp of something immeasurably greater. He exhaled, made his decision. "Show me." Nia nodded, and the mural's surface began to shift beneath their gaze. The painted stone rippled like water, colors bleeding into one another. Crimson, gold, indigo, until the image of the mountain dissolved, and a narrow archway shone where the wall had been. Pale light spilled from the opening, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Victor's heart hammered. The twins stepped aside, revealing the portal. It pulsed with gentle luminescence, as though breathing. He felt its pull, an almost magnetic tug in his chest. Memories fluttered at the edges of his mind. The floating library, voices woven of music, corridors paved with stars. Each dream he had dismissed as feverish nonsense now snapped into the clarity of truth. He wheeled himself forward, but the twins lifted him as though he weighed nothing. Their arms were strong, and their eyes shone with compassion. "You will walk this path," Nia said, "but our strength guides you." Together they passed through the arch. Victor felt a whisper of wind, cool and sweet, carrying a scent like wildflowers at dawn. The chamber behind them vanished, sealing the world he knew. Beyond lay a vast expanse of crystalline ground that stretched to infinity, fractured by luminous crevices that glowed like veins of light. A sky hung overhead, not blue or black, but shifting, a tapestry of dawn and dusk woven together, flecks of starlight twinkling amid sunbeams. Victor's breath caught. He had stepped into a realm forged from wonders, a place that existed between memories and dreams. The twins guided him onward, their footsteps silent even on the hard surface. He followed, uncertain, feeling both dread and exhilaration. At the horizon's edge loomed structures that resembled both temples and towers, carved from the same crystal as the ground, faceted like gems. They rose in spirals, connected by bridges of light that arched like ribbons. Victor realized with a start that the towers formed a circle, a colosseum of sorts, its center aglow with a soft, golden radiance. "We must reach the heart," Nyla whispered. "There we will see." They walked in silence, their presence calming the tremor in his soul. The farther they traveled, the more Victor sensed the presence of others, flickers of movement in the towers, echoes of distant song. It was as if this world was alive, a conscious being drawn to the keybearer and the bound ones. Suddenly, the ground beneath Victor's feet shifted. The crystalline floor rippled like water disturbed by a stone, fracturing into a pattern of spiderweb cracks. He stumbled, catching himself, and in that moment the twins rose on either side of him, lifting him up. When he looked down, the fractures glowed brighter, veins of light connecting them until they formed intricate runes. The runes pulsed in time with his heartbeat. "What is this?" Victor dared to ask. Nia's voice echoed around him, though her lips did not move. "It is the path of remembering. As you walk, you will recall the ancient song that binds all worlds." The runes responded, shimmering with each word. Victor felt the echoes of that song stirring in him, notes half-formed at first, then gradually coalescing into melody. He closed his eyes and let the sound fill him. The twins began to hum, a soft duet that wove itself into the runic pattern on the ground. Victor hummed too, uncertain of the tune until it sprang forth from his lips, a haunting, lilting melody that felt older than time. The runes flared in response, lighting a path that glowed brighter with every note. He opened his eyes, the path ahead now a roadmap of radiant symbols. At its end stood a grand archway, larger than the one he had passed through, carved of pure light. Beyond it, he glimpsed a space suffused with golden brilliance, the heart. But movement in the peripheral caught his eye. Figures emerged from the towers, stepping onto the glowing bridges. They were tall and lithe, their features blurred by distance, but Victor recognized their forms. Guardians, keepers of the gate. Each wore robes similar to the twins but darker, edged with silver. They carried staffs topped with orbs that pulsed with inner light. Victor's breath caught. Are they? Once they stood with us, Nyla said softly. But when the worlds diverged, the Guardians were lost. Now they return. The Guardians paused, as though sensing their moment. Light bloomed from their orbs and formed pillars that reached toward the sky. The air vibrated with power. Victor's pulse thrummed in harmony with the song coursing through his veins. He realized this was the moment of reckoning. To reclaim the gate, all must remember. He took a tentative step forward along the runic path. The twins flanked him, their hands on his shoulders. Each step he took caused the runes to blaze, sending ripples of light across the endless expanse. The Guardians watched impassively, staffs raised. When Victor reached the base of the archway, he faltered. The air shimmered, and he felt a barrier, soft as silk yet stronger than steel, guarding the heart of the gate. The golden light beyond seemed to beckon, promising answers, closure, perhaps even a return to wholeness for all the worlds. Speak the song, Nia urged, her voice a tremor in his mind. Let the worlds remember. Victor inhaled deeply. The melody swirled, richer now, with layers of harmony. Joy, sorrow, hope intertwined. He sang, not with his voice alone, but with his heart, his soul. The twins joined, their duet lifting into a choral tapestry that reached toward the heavens. The Guardians lowered their staffs as the song enveloped them. One by one, they began to hum the notes, their faces lifting. The barrier quivered. Victor pressed forward, pushing through the shimmering veil. It yielded like water drawn back by a current, and he emerged into a chamber of pure radiance. The heart of the gate lay before him, a towering prism of light, facets turning like a slow, brilliant dance. Beams of energy arced from it, connecting to the towers like spokes of a wheel. He approached, trembling. The twins stepped beside him, their expressions filled with solemn pride. The Guardians lined the chamber, silent vigil. Victor raised his hands, palms outward, and felt the pulse of the prism, a living heartbeat that echoed his own. The song reached its crescendo. Victor's voice rose in triumph, carrying the melody across the chamber. The prism responded, sending waves of golden light outward. The walls of the gate shimmered, and for an instant Victor glimpsed beyond. Worlds layered upon worlds, jade forests under violet skies, seas of silver mist, cities carved from living stone. But the vision teetered. The song faltered as the strain grew immense. Victor's legs shook, but he pressed on. The twins lent their strength, their voices unwavering. The Guardians joined, forming a chorus that transcended language. The prism's light intensified until it flooded the chamber, blindingly pure. Victor felt himself lifted, weightless, carried on the tide of the song. Memories flooded back, his birth in a distant realm, the moment the gate had closed, the sacrifice the bound ones had made to protect the worlds. He saw himself as a child, running in the courtyard of a palace of glass, chasing sunlight. He saw the twins, laughing, calling to him. He remembered love, loss, promise, and then, a single, crystal-clear intention, to restore balance. He opened his eyes and focused. The prism responded, bursting into a cascade of light that coalesced into a sphere above the gate's heart. The orb spun, radiating energy that threaded through the runes on the floor, through the staffs of the Guardians, through the souls of all who stood within the chamber. A thunderous chord resonated. Worlds wept and laughed in unison. The gate's archway widened, revealing the boundless realms beyond. But as the light peaked, a tremor shook the sphere. Victor sensed a fissure, not in the gate, but within himself. A doubt, a fear. The fear that he was not enough, that the song might falter at its most crucial moment. He squeezed his eyes shut, hearing Nia's soft whisper, "Remember yourself." And with that, he remembered. He remembered the boy who had dreamed of flying among stars, the man who had built empires from steel, the patient who had reclaimed his body step by trembling step. He remembered joy, pain, courage, love, all threaded together into one seamless tapestry. He opened his eyes, clear and resolute. "For all worlds," he sang. The prism responded with a blinding flash. The sphere above the gate's heart shattered into a million motes of light, racing outward in a web of illumination that pierced the archway. The realms beyond blossomed into view, bridging through the gate like dawn breaking the night. Victor felt the chamber release its hold. He stood at the threshold, the twins at his side, the guardians forming a protective circle. And as the worlds converged, a new harmony took shape, a living, breathing nexus of possibilities. In that moment, Victor knew that nothing would ever be the same, and that was precisely how it ought to be. He stepped forward, into the radiance, ready to guide the passage between worlds. Nia and Nyla followed, their eyes bright with purpose, and behind them the guardians, silent as stars. And so the gate opened at last, not as an ending, but as the beginning of an endless convergence of wonder. As Victor stepped into the radiance, the sensation was unlike anything he had ever known. It wasn't warmth or cold or any physical temperature. Rather, it was a resonance, a vibration that hummed through every cell in his body, aligning his very being with the rhythm of the universe itself. His footsteps made no sound. The ground beneath him was not made of stone or crystal now, but light, pure, soft, and infinite, as though he walked across the woven threads of reality. Around him, the light shifted and coalesced into forms, shapes that whispered of places lost to time. He saw vast cities suspended in the clouds, where towers rose like ivory thorns into violet skies. He glimpsed oceans that floated above deserts, islands drifting lazily in midair, tethered only by songs sung by creatures with wings of flame. Trees taller than mountains, whose leaves shimmered with memory itself. And voices, so many voices, soft, curious, ancient, welcoming. Victor realized then that the gate didn't simply connect to one other world. It was a nexus, a convergence point for all worlds, all possibilities. This was not just about travel. It was about reawakening the cosmic harmony that had once linked the scattered threads of creation. Nyla tugged gently at his sleeve. "They're waiting." He looked down, and the light parted before them like curtains being drawn. A wide, gleaming causeway revealed itself, arched bridges of glass and gold stretching across what appeared to be a vast sea of shifting stars. On the other side stood a council unlike any Victor could have imagined. Figures tall and cloaked in shimmering robes stood in formation around a great amphitheater. Each radiated a different hue, as though their presence was woven from the very elements of their realms. One bore the silver of moonlight, another the deep rust of volcanic ash, another yet the opal shimmer of deep ocean. They turned as Victor approached, and though none of them had visible mouths, he could feel their attention, their voices brushing his thoughts like whispers in a cathedral. He hesitated. Nia and Nyla stepped forward, flanking him again. This time, they no longer looked like children. Their forms shimmered at the edges, flickering with age and agelessness, ancient wisdom layered over youthful grace. Their voices echoed in his mind, as one. "He has returned. The keybearer has come home." A ripple passed through the assembly. Victor stepped into the center of the amphitheater, his breath steady, though the magnitude of the moment pressed on his chest like a storm gathering behind his ribs. A tall figure stepped forward, his robe a weave of midnight and emerald, stars twinkling in its folds. When he spoke, the sound was not just heard but felt, in the bones, in the memories. "Victor Holden," he said, and with that name came a rush of images. His birth, his accident, his empire, the loneliness, and then, the moment the twins arrived. Victor began, but the words faltered. He took a breath. "I didn't know any of this. I didn't remember who I was. I didn't even believe in anything beyond what I could touch and control. But now." "You remembered," the figure said simply. "And in remembering, you reopened the gate. You have restored the bond long lost." "Why me?" Victor asked, his voice rising. "Why not someone better suited? I was bitter, broken, angry. I lost everything." "You lost nothing," said another figure, her robe a cascade of flame and feather. You merely misplaced yourself. The gate requires one who has known separation. Only such a soul can carry the bridge between worlds. Victor looked down at his hands, the faint glow still present in his palms. But what now? What am I supposed to do? Now, Nyla said, stepping closer, we begin to repair what was broken. And protect what is still to come, Nia added, her gaze solemn. The amphitheater dimmed, and before them rose an enormous map, not drawn on parchment or stone, but hovering in the air, comprised of thousands of tiny stars. Each flickered with its own hue and pulse, and Victor instinctively understood, they were worlds. Real, living realms, each with its own people, stories, struggles. But many of the stars were dim. They're dying, Victor whispered. They're fading, the midnight-robed figure confirmed. Without the gate's light to nourish the lattice between the realms, many have drifted too far. Forgotten. Cut off. Some have collapsed entirely. Victor stepped forward, his hand reaching toward one of the dimmer stars. As his fingers neared it, the star brightened slightly, pulsing as though in recognition. You have always been connected to the lattice, Nia said, watching him carefully. Even when you did not know. But now, Nyla continued, you must choose. Will you stand as the key-bearer in truth? Will you guide the restoration of the harmony? Victor closed his eyes. He thought of his former life. The towering office buildings. The loneliness of penthouse suites. The hollow victories. He thought of the crash, the months of silence, the ache of being left behind by his own body. And then he thought of Nia and Nyla arriving. Their laughter. Their mischief. Their light. The first time he had felt something real in years. The moment he first wiggled his toes. The song. The gate. He opened his eyes. Yes. A new light erupted from the amphitheater's center. The sphere returned, though now smaller, denser, like a crystal core forming within him. The guardians began to chant, a slow rising sound that matched the cadence of Victor's own heartbeat. The twins lifted their hands and drew in the air a symbol. Ancient, curved, and pulsating with power. It hovered before Victor, then sank into his chest with a whisper of wind. The moment it touched him, he saw it all. Not just the worlds, but the people in them. A girl with wings of shadow standing in a collapsing temple, whispering prayers to a forgotten sky. A child chasing glowing insects through a war-torn forest, clutching a wooden sword. An old man blind with grief, sitting alone on the last crag of a crumbling mountain, singing a lullaby to the stars. He felt their hopes, their fears. He knew them. Tears rolled silently down his cheeks. They need help, he whispered. All of them. And you will give it, said the voice of the flame-robed figure. Not alone. Never alone. The bound ones walk with you. And others will rise, said the midnight-robed one. The gate is only the beginning. There are seeds in every realm. All that's needed is light. Victor turned to Nia and Nyla. Where do we begin? They smiled, in perfect unison. With the forgotten. The amphitheater faded, and the three of them stood again upon the glowing causeway, but now before them was a new portal, smaller than the gate, but rippling with urgency. Through it Victor saw a darkened world. No stars shone. The skies were heavy with ash. Towers broken and hollow stood like teeth against the horizon. The first realm to fall, said Nyla. Veltahar. It was once the crown of dawn. But now it chokes in shadow, added Nia. Victor clenched his fists, and the crystal in his chest pulsed in response. Let's bring the dawn back. They stepped forward as one. As they crossed the threshold into Veltahar, the air grew heavy with sorrow. The sky was thick with a sickly haze, casting everything in tones of copper and gray. The ruins of a once great city sprawled out before them, twisted spires and shattered archways overtaken by creeping black vines that pulsed like arteries. The light here was weak, almost as if the sun itself had forgotten this world. Victor felt the pull in his chest intensify. What happened here? The harmony was severed, Nia answered. They lost their connection to the song. The people turned inward, then on each other. They forgot who they were, Nyla added. A soft sound drifted on the wind, a child's cry. Victor turned toward it instantly. They climbed over rubble and broken staircases until they reached the remnants of a courtyard. There, crouched among the wreckage, was a small girl no older than 6, her skin streaked with soot, her hair matted. She was holding something tightly to her chest, a broken instrument, a harp with no strings. She looked up at them with wide, hollow eyes. Victor knelt. "What's your name?" She didn't speak. "She has no words left," Nia murmured, kneeling beside him. Victor reached forward slowly and extended his hand. "It's all right. I remember you." The girl blinked. Something in his voice cracked the shell around her. She extended the harp toward him, then pointed to her throat. No voice. No sound. "She's one of the last echo-bearers," Nyla said softly. "She used to sing the songs of binding." Victor took the harp. It shimmered faintly in his hands. And though it had no strings, he felt it vibrate, as if longing for music once again. He closed his eyes. And he sang. A low hum, the same melody he had sung at the gate, the same melody the twins had taught him. The song of remembering. The harp lit with each note, and the girl's eyes widened. She touched her throat, her lips parted, and she sang the next line. Faint, broken but clear. The vines shrieked. They recoiled from the courtyard, twisting and burning away under the light of the song. The sky cracked open slightly, revealing a shaft of real sunlight. Victor stood, the girl in his arms now. This world still remembers. The twins glowed at his side. And the gate, still open, waited. They had begun. Victor carried the girl through the broken arches of Veltahar, his arms cradling her as if she was something fragile and ancient. And she was. She represented more than just a survivor. She was a spark, a forgotten ember of a world that had once sung in perfect harmony with the song. Around them, the landscape trembled. The ground shifted, not from instability, but from the stirrings of memory, as if the world itself was slowly awakening. The child, whose name he still didn't know, clutched the stringless harp, which now pulsed faintly with light. Every so often, she hummed a single note. Each one echoed across the shattered city like a whisper sent down a cavern of time. And with each note, more vines withered. More of the sky cleared. Victor looked to Nia. How much can one voice really do? She held his gaze without hesitation. All of it. If it's the right voice, at the right moment. Nyla nodded. The song doesn't need armies. It needs echoes. Even a whisper can shape reality, if it remembers its purpose. They walked on in silence, picking their way through ruined marketplaces and broken stone, until they reached a structure that once must have been the city's heart, a great hall, half collapsed, its golden dome fractured, open to the still darkened sky. Crumbled columns lay like fallen sentinels around it. But at its center stood a monument, untouched, strangely whole. It was a pillar of translucent stone, carved with words in a language Victor didn't know but somehow understood. Names. Thousands of names. A memorial. At its base, a phrase was etched deeper than the rest, glowing faintly. When we forget, the darkness wins. When we remember, the light returns. Victor set the girl down gently. She walked to the pillar without hesitation, her hand reaching out, fingers brushing the surface. As she did, the stone pulsed, and from the cracks in the dome above, a beam of light burst down onto her head like a spotlight from the heavens. Then the air began to shimmer. Victor felt it before he saw it, an unraveling, a peeling back of some invisible veil. The shadows of Veltahar began to stretch and twist. From the edges of the broken hall came shapes, creatures, not quite beasts, not quite human. Shadows with eyes. Tall, sinewed forms made of smoke and malice, drifting like they weighed nothing at all. The forgotten, Nyla whispered. They feed on silence, Nia added. On absence. On disconnection. Victor stepped forward instinctively, shielding the girl with his body. Can they be fought? Not with weapons, Nia said. Only with truth, said Nyla. Victor stood tall, forcing the tremble from his legs. He looked at the girl. Can you sing again? She hesitated. The harp hummed in her arms. Behind them, the Forgotten circled. Their mouths opened, revealing teeth that dissolved into dust and reformed as they moved. Whispering. Give her to us. She has no place. No name. Let her fade. Let her be forgotten. Victor clenched his fists. She remembers. And so do I. He turned toward the creatures, raising his voice into a steady tone, low and certain. The world remembers. The Forgotten recoiled. Victor stepped forward, singing again. The song welled up in his chest, not forced, not rehearsed, but right. A perfect, resonating note that wove through the air like a golden thread. The girl joined him, her high, clear voice a fragile counterpoint. Nia and Nyla harmonized, their voices weaving around his like ribbons. The effect was immediate. The darkness screamed. The Forgotten writhed and dissolved, not with violence, but with peace, as if they'd been released from their purpose. As if the song had given them something they'd yearned for across lifetimes. One by one, they disintegrated into beams of pale light that soared into the sky. When the last one vanished, silence fell. And then the city breathed. Victor watched in awe as light flowed through the cracks in the stone. The vines shriveled and crumbled. Windows repaired themselves with glass born from memory. Colors returned, reds and blues and brilliant greens that had not touched the city in decades. The dome above reformed, not of metal, but of living crystal, capturing the light of a now visible sun and scattering it into rainbow rays across the walls. The girl stood beneath it all, her face upturned, eyes wide with wonder. Her voice still hummed, a melody of healing and return. Victor turned to the twins, breathing heavily. We did it. Nia placed a hand on his shoulder. You did. No, Victor said, his eyes returning to the girl. She did. The girl turned toward him, and for the first time, she smiled. It was the kind of smile that came not from happiness, but from being found. Then, at last, she spoke. My name is Kale. Victor felt the words settle in his chest. Kale. The first restored name of Veltahar. The first flame relit. Nyla smiled gently. Names are seeds. With them, entire worlds can regrow. Victor knelt. Kale, would you come with us? We're going to other worlds. Places that need the song. She nodded instantly, as if there was no hesitation in her heart. The three of them, Victor, Kale, and the twins, walked back toward the portal. As they did, the people of Veltahar began to emerge from the ruins. Thin, blinking, cautious. But they came. Their skin was sallow, their clothes worn, their steps uncertain. Yet when they saw Kale, the girl with the shining harp and the strong voice, they paused. And some of them began to hum. One by one, low and shaky, voices joined the song. As if the music had been buried in their bones all along, waiting only for permission to be remembered. When Victor turned back at the threshold of the portal, the entire city was lit by music. Back at the Nexus, the stars of the lattice had shifted. One that had once been dim now glowed with the same golden hue as Kale's harp. And as it brightened, so too did others flicker, worlds still waiting, still silent, but now not completely alone. Victor looked to the twins. Where next? Nia turned her head, eyes distant. There's a world that drowns in mirrors. Every surface reflects lies. Nyla added, and no one there remembers their real face. Victor frowned. How do we help them? Nia touched his chest, where the song still thrummed faintly. By showing them yours. Another portal shimmered into view, this one rippling with silver like moonlight on broken glass. Kale clutched Victor's hand as they stepped through. The new world was cold. Icy wind sliced across a desert of white sand, and every few paces stood tall, flawless mirrors mounted in iron frames. The sky above was pale and cloudless, but the mirrors flickered with shadows. As they moved forward, one of the mirrors turned toward Victor. And in it, he did not see himself, but a broken version, twisted and cruel, eyes filled with contempt and regret. Cale gasped. "They show what you fear," Nyla said. "Not what you are." Victor stared at the reflection, fists clenched. The twisted version of himself mocked him, sneering in silence. Then Cale stepped forward. She stood before the mirror and lifted the harp. She plucked it, and though it still had no strings, a note sounded. Clear. Real. The mirror cracked. Just a fracture. But it was enough. Nia took Victor's hand. "This world needs truth," Nyla added, "but they've only known distortion." Victor closed his eyes. The memory of his former self, the bitter man who had curled into silence and pain, rose to the surface. The mirror's version. But instead of rejecting it, he embraced it. "I remember you," he said aloud to the mirror. The reflection blinked. "I know what you were. But I'm not afraid of you anymore." He lifted his hand and pressed it against the glass. A shock ran through his arm. The mirror cracked again, then shattered. From the fragments, light spilled outward, and suddenly the wind shifted. In the distance, other mirrors began to tremble. Some tilted. Some fell. And from behind them emerged people, each different, all cautious. They had been trapped behind their own distorted reflections, imprisoned in false selves. Cale played a note again. Then another. The harp now shimmered fully with visible strings, glowing with golden light. As her music grew, the people stirred, gathering around her. One woman wept openly as she looked into a broken mirror and saw her real face for the first time in decades. Victor turned to Nia and Nyla. "We need more help. More people like Cale." "They'll come," Nyla said. "The remembered always do." Victor nodded, gazing across the new realm, now trembling on the edge of awakening. He could feel the lattice pulling gently, always forward, always to the next world in need. There would be more battles. Not of blades or fire, but of memory, of truth, of remembrance. He held Cale's hand, and together they stepped forward, deeper into the realm of mirrors, ready to show its people who they had always truly been. Victor moved deeper into the mirror realm, the silver sands crunching beneath his boots like frost. Around him, fractured glass glittered in jagged piles, catching light not from any sun, but from the music still resonating in the air. Cale walked beside him, her harp glowing more steadily with every step. Nia and Nyla flanked them, their presence quiet but strong, like ancient sentinels. Behind them, a slow procession of people had begun. Silent, cautious, newly freed from behind their false reflections. They came barefoot, dusted in soot and glass, their eyes swollen with memories returning. Some wept openly, others kept touching their faces, as if unsure they were real. Children clung to parents they barely recognized. Old men sat in the sand and laughed through their tears. Each had come from behind a mirror, stepping through when Cale's song shattered the illusions they believed for too long. Victor paused beside a fallen mirror. In its surface, he no longer saw a twisted version of himself. He saw the truth, flaws and strength, sorrow and resilience. A man who had been broken and rebuilt. The reflection nodded back at him, no longer a stranger. Nyla approached from behind, brushing wind-blown strands of hair from her eyes. "They don't remember how they got here. Most never do." Victor turned to her, watching as Cale comforted a small boy who had just emerged, bloodied from the shards but whole. "Why are these people trapped?" "Because they accepted the lie that their pain defined them," Nia said, appearing on his other side. They looked into the mirrors, and instead of facing what they saw, they became it. Victor exhaled, the cold wind biting into his lungs. "Then we break every mirror. Shatter every illusion." Nyla's gaze held a flicker of warning. "No. Some must be faced before they fall. If you shatter a lie before the heart is ready, the truth will destroy it. Kale's harp sounded again, an accidental note. Several of the remaining mirrors pulsed in response, a slow vibration that hummed beneath the sand. One of them turned, unbidden, toward Victor. He stared into it, but this time he didn't see himself. He saw a man with eyes like his, but taller, broader, wrapped in shadows and light. His body shimmered with shifting sigils, some beautiful, others terrifying. Around his neck hung a broken chain, and in his hand he held a flame, alive, writhing, whispering in a language Victor didn't know but somehow felt. The figure looked directly at him. "The key turns both ways," the man said. "Are you strong enough to lock what must not be opened?" Victor took a step back, chest tight. The reflection didn't move with him. It stayed perfectly still. Separate. Real. "Who is that?" he asked aloud. Nia and Nyla stepped in front of the mirror together, their expressions unreadable. Nyla said, "That is a mirror of what you might become." "Or might already be," added Nia. Victor's hands clenched. "He looked at me. He knew me." "He is bound to you," Nyla said. "Another version of the keybearer. But not one who opened the gate." "He closed it," Nia finished. Victor stared at the flickering figure in the mirror. The man turned away, walking into shadows, leaving behind a scorched trail. With a whisper like tearing silk, the mirror cracked, not shattered, but split down the center. "Do not follow him yet," Nyla warned. "You are not ready," said Nia. Kale came to his side, her small hand finding his. "But you will be." He looked at her, then at the others gathering now. Men, women, children. Dozens, perhaps more. Each one slowly regaining their voice, their face, their truth. Victor turned from the mirror and began walking again. The realm stretched outward, wide as a desert, filled with rows upon rows of mirrors, some upright, others collapsed, others buried in dunes of silver dust. As the group moved forward, they came across a wide platform, once a plaza, now a crater surrounded by broken glass. In the center stood a singular, enormous mirror, taller than any structure they had seen. It rose like a blade into the sky, its edges jagged, its surface smooth as oil. It pulsed, sending waves of distortion across the ground. People stopped walking. Even the air held still. Kale looked up at Victor. "That's the source." "The master mirror," Nia confirmed. "The origin of this realm's illusion." "No one has passed through it," Nyla added. "They either become what they see, or they forget entirely." Victor stepped forward, but the air thickened as he neared it. His chest tightened. Behind him, the people murmured in fear. Some began to back away. A few knelt in prayer. Others closed their eyes, unwilling to see what might lie within. Victor reached the edge of the platform. The surface of the mirror rippled. And then he heard his voice, from inside. "You should never have opened the gate." His image stepped through. Not the cruel, twisted version from before. This one looked identical. Same clothes. Same face. Same posture. But his eyes were empty. "I protected the realms by sealing them," the reflection said. "Do you think you're saving them? You're exposing them." Victor took a step forward, chest rising with each breath. "I'm helping them remember." The reflection sneered. "And when the forgotten return? When the gates between worlds become doors for monsters?" "They already are," Victor snapped. "You left them to rot. I'm giving them back their truth." "They'll betray it," the reflection said calmly. "They always do." The mirror pulsed. Kale's harp let out a discordant note. Cracks appeared in the air. The people behind Victor began to shout in alarm as shadows spilled from the edges of the master mirror. Long robed figures formed, blank faces, limbs too thin, movements like flickers of film played backward. Victor turned. "Nia." "Faceless," she said grimly. "The echoes of unmade truths. They cannot be destroyed, Nyla warned. Only resolved. Victor stepped back as the reflection advanced. What do I do? Kale held up her harp. Sing. Victor stared at her. I don't know the song. You are the song, she cried. The mirror pulsed again. The reflection was close now, reaching out with hands identical to Victor's. You'll become me, it whispered. You'll see. Victor took one breath. Then another. Then he opened his mouth. And let go. The sound that left him wasn't just a melody. It was memory. It was his mother's hand on his shoulder as a child. It was the feel of his legs giving way during the crash. It was the laughter of the twins the first time they painted his wheelchair. It was Kale's trembling voice in the hall of Veltahar. It was the echo of truth heard in silence. The note vibrated outward like a storm. The faceless figures trembled. One by one, their blank masks cracked. From beneath, faces emerged, some frightened, some angry, some young, some old. Not monsters. People. Trapped in forgetting. The master mirror screamed, not audibly, but in twisting waves of pressure and distortion. The reflection of Victor roared, lunging. But Kale sang with him. Then Nia. Then Nyla. Then dozens. The people raised their voices, some shouting, some whispering. The sound was raw and human and flawed and perfect. The mirror cracked. The reflection dissolved, screaming into the wind. The faceless fell to their knees, sobbing as their forms re-solidified, real again. Then, with a sound like breaking thunder, the master mirror shattered. A column of golden light shot skyward. The wind howled. The realm shifted, groaning like something ancient and weary and finally free. The sky broke open. And then silence. Victor stood among glass and song and ash, breathing hard. He looked around. The people stared at the sky, eyes wide. Then they began to laugh. Laugh. Like it was the first time. Kale looked up at him, her eyes shining. Victor nodded, unable to speak. He turned to the twins. Where next? He asked. But they didn't answer immediately. Instead, they knelt beside a patch of glass. Nia whispered. The gate is calling. But not for us this time. Kale stepped forward. For me. Nyla smiled. For all of you. Behind them, more children stepped from the crowd. Some with instruments. Others with nothing but memory. Each shining faintly with something newly born. Victor felt the song rise again in his chest. And far above, the stars shifted. The lattice glowed. Another realm was stirring. One made of fire and ice. Of time itself gone wrong. Victor turned toward the new portal, his feet already moving. He didn't look back. Because he knew. The truth was no longer behind him. It was ahead. Victor stepped through the final gate as if walking into a heartbeat. This world was unlike the others. There were no shadows, no mirrors, no vines or silence. Instead, the land itself pulsed like a living organ. Mountains rose and fell as if breathing. The sky shifted in fragments, as though stitched from broken clocks. Time here had no shape, no logic. One moment they were standing in a forest of glass trees, the next on a bridge suspended over falling stars. But what struck Victor most was the stillness beneath it all, as if this world had once known rhythm, and then lost it. Kale walked beside him, her harp now glowing not with light, but with time. Each note she played didn't just echo, it rewound or rushed forward. A single pluck of a string made a tree bloom and then crumble into dust within seconds. They had entered the realm where the song had first been broken. And waiting for them in the heart of this world was the source of it all. Not a monster. Not a warlord. But a child. He stood alone at the center of a collapsing courtyard made of floating ruins, his hands wrapped around a sphere of pure chronoglass, liquid time frozen into a sphere. His eyes were old. Older than any Victor had seen. And in those eyes danced every moment ever lived. Joy, war, heartbreak, love, betrayal, sacrifice. "You're the composer," Kale whispered. The boy nodded. "I was," he replied, "until I forgot the end of the song." His voice sent waves across the air, ripples that aged the stones and wilted the stars above. Victor stepped forward, his voice steady. "We're here to help you remember." The boy looked up, and for a moment, his face softened. "But what if remembering destroys everything I once saved?" Behind them, the realm cracked again. Mountains aged to dust in seconds. Rivers flowed backward into the clouds. Cities flickered between creation and ruin like blinking lights. All because the composer, once the guardian of time's rhythm, had fallen out of tune. "Why did you forget it?" Kale asked gently. The boy turned toward her. "Because I watched every ending. And they were always the same. Grief. War. Silence. Even in the brightest songs, the last note was always pain." He clenched his hand around the sphere. "So I stopped singing. I broke the tempo. Froze the final note so no world could reach it. And without the end, no one could hurt anymore." Victor's breath caught. It made sense now. The silence in Veltahar, the lies in the mirror realm, the shadows, the faceless. They weren't random. They were echoes of a world without resolution. Realms without endings. "You didn't save them," Victor said softly. "You trapped them." The boy flinched. "I gave them time." "No," Victor said. "You gave them fear. You made them afraid to finish the song." Behind him, the people who had journeyed across realms, those who had been freed, began to gather. Some wore robes, others simple rags. Many held instruments newly formed from memory. They said nothing, but their presence was thunderous. And in the center of them all, Kale stepped forward. She raised her harp. "We're not afraid anymore." The composer's hands trembled. "You don't understand. If the song ends, I end. The world resets. Everything starts over. Maybe disappears forever." Nyla's voice rose like a tide. "That's not how songs work." "They don't end," said Nia. "They resolve." Victor placed a hand on the composer's shoulder. "Let us finish it. Together." The sphere pulsed in the boy's palm. And then, for the first time in countless ages, he released it. The sphere floated upward, weightless, fragile, infinite, and as it rose, Kale struck a single chord. It echoed through time. Everywhere. In every realm Victor had touched, Veltahar, the mirror world, the frozen bridges of Selena, the echoing plains of the forgotten, people looked up, listened, remembered, and they sang. It wasn't coordinated. It wasn't polished. It was raw and human and perfectly imperfect. In the realm of broken time, music flooded the cracks. Kale played, and with every note, the composer remembered. Laughter from a world reborn, tears shared between mother and child, the heartbeat of the first realm ever created. Victor joined her. Nia and Nyla added their voices. And then, one by one, every person who had crossed through the gates, who had walked through sorrow and silence, joined too. It was not a performance. It was a reunion. The lattice above shone like a living constellation, each realm a star now humming in harmony. The lattice trembled, then expanded. New stars appeared. Realms that had never existed before. Worlds born not from escape, but from truth. The composer's body shivered. His ancient eyes glistened. "I remember the final note," he whispered. "It's not sorrow. It's hope." Victor nodded, tears in his eyes. "Sing it." The boy smiled. Then he opened his mouth and released the ending. Not an explosion. Not a collapse. A homecoming. The realm around them stilled. The sky turned gold. The floating ruins settled into place. Time wove itself back into harmony. Not linear. Not circular. A melody. A cycle with purpose. And when the note faded, silence returned. Not the oppressive silence from before, but peace. The composer stood, blinking. I don't need to stay, he said. The song no longer belongs to me. Victor turned to him. It never did. It belongs to all of us. Kale stepped forward, offering her harp to the boy. Play it whenever you want. Or just listen. The song's still here. The composer nodded, placing the harp against his heart. Then he faded, gently, like a dream slipping into dawn. As his presence vanished, something vast and brilliant filled the sky. A new gate. Not one of escape or travel, but of invitation. A portal of light, connecting all the worlds, flowing like a river of song through the stars. Nia looked up, her voice hushed. The lattice is open now. Every world can hear each other, said Nyla. Victor turned, facing the people, his companions, his family, those who had walked this journey with him. He saw faces once broken now whole. Children who had no names now laughing and dancing. Elders singing the names of the fallen, weaving them back into legacy. Songs of mourning. Songs of joy. Songs of rebirth. Kale stood beside him, no longer just the girl with the harp. She was now the first voice of the new chorus. Victor raised his hand, not in command, but in invitation. To anyone, anywhere, in any world, he called, his voice rising like thunder. You are remembered. You are real. You are welcome. A roar of song answered him. Then he turned to Kale and whispered, Take us home. The gate opened wide, light pouring like a sunrise across eternity. Victor walked forward, not alone, not broken, not afraid. He had found the final note. And in doing so, he had written the beginning of a new song. A song without end. A song of the remembered.